welcome to another Timeless Education Group meeting. We had a bit of trouble getting the group together, but now we're here and we are ready to continue from where we left off with the various functions of human types. And I guess the theme of this conversation was going to be more on how to organize culture or society based on human types. But yeah, I mean, we will still be talking about all kinds of things related to types. So yeah, we'll see what the title ends up being. And for this conversation, Christian had put together a bunch of questions that we're going to go through, and then we'll see where we end up. So we're a bit late, so we'll just jump straight into it. And the first question was, do human types exist? How can we confirm their existence? Any particular reason why you wanted to ask this question, Christian?
Yeah, because I felt like just by asking these questions, it would get out a lot of opinions, basically. I think it would open up a lot more discussion. So I thought it would be a good question to ask, especially since we're talking about human types and that there's these psychologies like already out there. So I mean, like just discussing even if human types exist, I think is important, and just how you can confirm their existence. So I was thinking, like any other typology, you would of course need experience with other people. I was thinking since you do have YouTube, I mean, it is easier, I think, to confirm types now than it would have been like back then. Like, for example, when Carl Jung came up with his psychological types theories and stuff like that, or even, yeah, mainly that. So, like back then, it would have been more difficult. Whereas now you can go on the internet, look up YouTube videos and stuff like that, and find tons of people on the internet, and you can find different personalities all over the place. And then, yeah, so I'm thinking that the way to confirm it is through your own experience, through maybe even watching YouTube videos, and grouping certain tendencies that you can find among people that recur, and through looking through history, I think too. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I would also say it's like the repeating patterns that you come across, and that are not simply that cannot be explained so easily by genetics, since we can perceive repeating behaviors in people who are not related and things like that.
Yeah, I was also gonna add that there are multiple clinicians and philosophers that have discovered repeating archetypes in the observations they themselves made or in the patients that they had, and they have, and using their psychological knowledge and also their own observations, they were able to put people in different categories, and that this has happened in multiple periods of time. So I think that will confirm the existence of the archetypes.
Yeah, why was it not possible to explain it by genetics?
Because you will find that the parents and the child sometimes can have very different types, and there is no predictable combination, as in you have parents of type A, it results in type C more often, or type B more often. They didn't find any specific patterns.
Okay, because I think I heard you, Andreas, say one time that it's common for parents to or for you to have your share some of the types with one of your parents or something like that. Is that true that you said that?
I don't remember if I have said.
I don't remember he has said that.
Yeah, I think he said the opposite.
Yeah,
Yep.
I also think Andreas said the opposite.
Well, but one thing that I think might be possible is that I've been thinking is that I think that there might be a higher percentage that the offspring will be of the same type as one of the parents, but overall, I think that it is even more likely that it will be a type other than the same as its parents. For example, if you say that there is like, I don't know, 20% chance it will be like the father, and 20% it will be like the mother. That's 40%, but there's still 60% chance it will be one of the other types, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that you can also take into account the concept of genetic recombination, which is that chromosomes, when the zygotes are forming, which are the ova and the sperm, they kind of mix up genes. So you don't have you can inherit some aspects of your personality or your type from maybe an ancestor very far away from your family. So that's why it looks random in real time.
Yeah, but that would be explained. It could be explained by the genetic paradigm, I think.
Yeah, but you have so many ancestors, like hundreds of ancestors, that all of them have all the types, like in total. So that's why it will be kind of random. I think you can't predict that. If you put parent X and Y, you're gonna get type Z. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could get any of the types really from any two parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also don't think that genetics would be a good indicator, or that the child would follow as with genes, because remember, a child would be a combination of parent A and B, and the product, I would say, it's Z. So the child won't be like the mother's type or the father's type, but it will be something else.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially if you take in the configurations into consideration. So, I mean, we could speak of 3 types, and then there is a more higher likelihood that the offspring will be the same type as the parent. But if you have 9 types, it becomes a bit less. And if we're talking about 81 types, then I think it will be even the most unlikely that they would be exactly like their parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking on the same lines that Gian was talking about when it comes to ancestors, genetics, and stuff like that. Like, because we have such a huge ancestry line that like it's got to be guaranteed that everyone probably in our families has gone through all the energy types before. So it should be then possible for anyone to have any of the 9 energies in any kind of configuration, making it random. That's why I think I wonder back in prehistoric times if the types existed, how they just started to occur and stuff like that, and what was really going on, I guess, with types.
But I mean, can you completely like discard the genetic? Like, don't you have to look at different, large scale? Don't you have to do like large scales research to really determine whether, like, if there are more tendencies to?
Yeah, it's just that the way genetics is understood or perceived right now, it seems something is missing, or I don't know. I mean, I haven't really come across a satisfying explanation.
Yeah.
But regarding how to confirm their existence, I was hoping that perhaps you could, use something like brain scan. I asked Ashkan about this, but since he researches and studies things like that, but he said that the brain is too complex to be able to know what every single connection and things like that does. But I mean, they have discovered certain visible things, like that certain people have a larger frontal lobe or more activity in the frontal lobe, like Einstein's brain, I think they spoke of. And then, of course, there's the examples of criminals who have or psychopaths who have less of the empathy. I forget what these parts of the brains are called, but I mean, I'm thinking something like that should reveal something if you can get people together.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it will be interesting if, like, a psychiatrist, for example, has a list of patients they have diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, which is the clinical name of psychopathy. And we take brain scans of them and we find a pattern, and then we can have like an interview with them and we find that they're all Exidium types, or like maybe we have one magnitude with Exidium secondary, or we just find a correlation between a certain like result in the brain scans of these ASPD patients and also their type, for example.
Yeah. And regarding the brain, I wouldn't say that the brain is necessarily the cause of the type, but more like the brain develops according to some kind of pattern in these typological energies or whatever they are, so that the brain would have to adapt to what type the person is. But the second question is, what are human types? Since we have been saying that they are not necessarily genetics as we understand it today.
Yeah.
And I tend to think there are something in between genetics and like the core soul, if we're talking through a kind of spiritual perspective or these spiritual teachings. For those who subscribe to that stuff, the soul is like the core that cannot really be defined, the new self that is like space.
When you talk about human evolution and stuff like that, I know you bring up higher energy structures, and then you brought up something called the species pattern, like that's above genetics or above DNA and all that kind of stuff. It like gives an inherent animating pattern to like each living thing that exists. So then,
because it
which
does
I've heard a similar theory. I've heard a similar thing from Martin Ball as well, I think. That's based on like higher energy structures that then are brought down to lower and lower forms.
Yeah,
but
because it does feel like these types are connected to the life force in a way. There's like a push, a strong push or elicited will that is in the realm of what I refer to as doing. We can detach from it and observe it, but we're still running on these energies like it is connected to our life force. And I separate life force from consciousness, even though consciousness may be the fundamental cause of or from where everything springs, so to speak. But still, if we are dividing it into categories.
But in reincarnation, if we postulate that exists, would your the thing that reincarnates, would it be necessarily the same type as it was in the last lifetime, or could it be a new one?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that it could be a new one, and it could be the same. It depends on how these energies, how closely connected they are to like the physical body and genetics and things like that.
Yeah.
If they are more connected to genetics than we think, then probably you can have a different energy pattern or type in a different incarnation. If we assume or postulate that reincarnation is what's going on.
Yeah.
I was also going to say that these types, I think, should be something a bit higher than our genetic makeup. Say, like,
Did he freeze?
7 billion different kinds of fingerprints.
Oh, he's back.
You would have 7 billion different kinds of fingerprints, you see, but the human types are a bit on a higher level because you can identify specific types across bringing together people with different types of fingerprints, if we were to use that example. So it's I think it's a higher structure, it's a higher level structure of humans.
Yeah, because
it is higher.
The more diverse something is, like genetics or the fingerprint, like you're talking about, the more it is, the lower it is. And the higher something is,
Aha.
the more unifying it is, the less it is. Since we have a limited
Sure.
categories of types, then yeah, it would be kind of higher. That makes sense.
Yeah, and then you could reduce it further to like positive, negative, and just neutral energy.
Yeah, and the more we reduce things like to our absolute purest essence is simply this kind of space-like observation or consciousness. And this is where everyone are identical, or nobody has any particular identity within this core. And then a little further out, you have perhaps something like the 3 fundamental types, and then you go to 9 types and 81 configurations, and then you go further into genetics and sexes and races and all of this stuff.
Yeah, just more variation in general.
Yeah. So that was what are human types. So the next question is how do types exist? And I'm not sure what you mean by that. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question to ponder. How
Yeah, I was thinking more like I think we've sort of been trying to touch on it kind of, because I was thinking when I was thinking of like how do types exist, I was saying how do they come to be, like how do types even arise or like come to exist or something like that.
From the beginning.
Hmm?
From the beginning. Like how did they appear in the human species to begin with?
Yeah, right. Like the originator or like the cause or something.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting because I feel like that's the mystery. I think that's like the big unknown part of it.
Yeah, but there are many, personality models like the Big Five personality. The Big Five talks about conscientiousness, and Jordan B. Peterson has said that there is no animal model for it, for conscientiousness, and we have something like that in this typology as well, such as meritum. It's the closest to conscientiousness, and so it does seem like these energies are somehow they are part of what defines human beings as a species. So probably they arose at the same time as human beings, whatever that leap was or what caused that leap, along with speech and all of this other higher thinking that separates us from the other primates.
Yeah.
It will be interesting.
Yeah, because
Oh, sorry. Oh, you can go on.
Well, I feel like the energies in general, like if you were to take one of them out, like you would be missing some part of humanity. Like if you were to take them apart and isolate certain ones, and you only had like 2 of them, you'd be missing a huge part of humanity. Like humanity wouldn't even be humanity without these energies.
Yeah, I was also thinking that it will be interesting to, for example, do a study on chimpanzees or gorillas and observing if you can cluster them in different categories and observing what comes up, and maybe you can find a parallel with like the more sort of the lower corner, the lower right corner of the model. For example, I've noticed, I mean, it's not exactly, but roughly, for example, when I showed the stadium pictures to my father and my mother, like I asked them, what do you think the average person that belongs to this type will be? Oh, it's those like trucker guys that look like big gorillas. That was their phrasing. And then I was thinking about the body structure of, it sounds a little goofy, but follow me. So, and then if you look at chimpanzees, they are a little bit more playful and less, I guess, rough, for example. So maybe you could find that the types in the lower spheres maybe appear less sophisticated, of course, because humans are more intelligent in animal species. But I guess, for example, you don't have meritum or fiducian energy in animals. For example, you don't have something comparable to those. So Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that. Yeah, that's actually interesting, especially if like the chimpanzee is the closest to us when it comes to yeah, like I think it's a DNA comparison or something. But then how come it's only like 2% difference creates something like this or something, or you get this much of a difference?
Yeah, but you're also saying that different monkeys have different. So like gorillas then would be more excidium than other monkeys. So
the libidinum, for example, and chimpanzees are a little more like libidinum,
But in humans, all types are represented.
That's interesting, because you don't have the fiducian equivalent in animals, for example, or meritum. So that's maybe something exclusive to humans.
Yeah, that's why Christian said that they are like what makes humans what they are. Like they are human species defining energies. It's like, I sometimes separate human beings as belonging to like the human kingdom rather than the animal kingdom. Not that we don't share certain aspects with the animals and animal kingdom, but it's like we have no natural enemy. It's very like there's not a very good balance with man if we put man among other animals. So instead, what the challenge that human beings face are not animals, such as within the animal kingdom, where they are like in a cooperating and in conflict in a kind of ecosystem where they eat each other, but sometimes also can coexist thanks to each other. But with human beings, it's more like a social thing with humans among humans, so that the main conflict is between different humans, and the main support is also between various humans. Even if we also get help from animals, or more like exploit animals, but So that's how I think of it a little bit, and that's why we have something like types in human beings that you don't really see as much of in animals. There may be something similar to it, but it's not at all on the same level.
Right.
And it might be because with animals you can breed them, and you can breed specific qualities, and they often inherit. Many animals do inherit the traits of their parent offspring or parent, which does not seem to be the case with human beings, since they can come out as a different type, regardless of what the cause is. Because if this genetic component, and that's another reason to be skeptical of ordinary genetics, because why is it that animals can be bred to have, if you put two fast horses together, you often produce a strong, healthy, fast horse. But with human beings, that's not at all a certainty. And even if you explain it like, oh, it's still genetics because we have previous ancestors far back and their genes could reactivate in your offspring. But why isn't that happening in animals, so that you can't really breed them in the same way? I don't know if there is many study around this. I mean, it is a little bit taboo, and that's understandable because of eugenics and things like that.
Yeah, and human rights, I was gonna say, because in animals you can have you can do selective breeding, as in the first generation of offspring you will have some that inherit the trait and some that didn't, and so then you grab the ones that did and then you breed them again among themselves, and then you get another generation, and then that's purer, and then another generation that's even purer, and you exclude the ones that don't inherit the traits. And in human beings you can't repeat the same because of human rights, so you can't really
Like you can't even experiment it or try it or
But can't you see in family trees where like parents have shared interests and like qualities, and they're
because I've like in my family, for example, apparently like throughout the history there's been a lot of like depression and like negative emotions and stuff like that has like shown a recurring pattern throughout like our entire family tree. So then I think that's interesting, because then it's like if the human types are random and stuff like that, how come there's like just this tendency for like all this like negative traits? It seems like they're being passed on through our family and stuff like that. Like whenever I talk to my family about my problems and stuff like that, and like being depressed and stuff, they're like, oh well, it's a part of our family tree. Like it's just how we are. It's like the Russell effect, they call it, and stuff like that. Like it's just a part of the family tree.
Yeah, the problem
So
with the family tree is that, like, in human beings, it gets into the theme of incest, but you can't really breed them on the same family, And when you're doing these experiments of genetic experiments, you need like a small group of a gene pool, a small gene pool. And so what you would want to do is you grab like the first generation, you get the offspring, and then you interbreed the offspring, which means that you will have to have children with your sister, and then those children among themselves have to have children with themselves, and then the next generation, and so you purify the same genetic pool of your family that includes your dad, your mom, and your siblings. That's
But
how
in
you have to
humans, usually
multiply.
that results in insanity, like the
Yeah,
royal families and stuff.
exactly. So that's interesting. You mentioned that.
So with animals, you can breed them with like incest-like relationships,
Yeah,
and it doesn't cause damage as in humans.
it causes some damage at some point. Yeah, but it's not as prominent as in humans. It's like 3 or 4 generations, so it does cause some damage. But what you want to see is the genes and the specific trait that you're seeing. So the other damage, the other collateral damage doesn't matter when you're examining. As in, even if the mouse has some like mental, for example, impairments, if you still see that it's a code trait that you're trying to breed, it like that's good. For example, if you notice among different dog breeders, that they will cross among siblings, and then when the family is big enough, like you repeat the same trait with, let's say, 3 different parents, like parents A, parents B, parents C, that have that trait that you're looking for. You get offspring of parents A with offspring of parents C. So in that way you avoid that damage to the offspring, and you can still have functional animals. But there is still a higher risk with pure breed dogs than with like a non-pure breed of them having diseases, for example. I know that's common among dog breeders and dog.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think we need to move on a bit here.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know. I mean, I don't know if you had prepared answers to these questions, Christian. Do you have like
yeah, I did.
a brief answer to this?
To how types exist,
Yeah,
or like how
if
they
they
come
are
about
inherent
or
or a
come
result
to.
of genetics and things like that.
Not really. I mean, I kind of just let's see here. Yeah, I just kind of wrote down like I'm not really sure, and then like pretty much what we've been discussing so far. That's pretty much like what I've written down too, or written down. So
Yeah. So the question of how do types exist, and are they inherent or result of culture and genetics, are kind of similar, and I think we've talked about that. So.
yeah, the thing I have about culture though that I think is interesting is like how can you confirm types even in cultures and stuff like that, especially when people are like heavily influenced by culture and imitate it and are like hypnotized by it. Then how can you, if everyone's like copying each other's type, then how can you actually then distinguish all the types and be able to see through all of it if most people are just imitating their culture and stuff? So
Yeah. So if you
I
have
thought
like large thing like socialism or something, then and everyone in that country is socialists, they still will adopt the socialism in different ways depending on their type or something.
You mean socialization? Sorry, just kind of clarifying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, socialization. Yeah.
But you still have conflicts within families, even if everyone are like raised the same way. I mean, the thing about types is that it is the thing that kind of reacts against socialization and against this conformity or or whatever the culture is. And then you have if we divide them into 3 types, then you have like the types that tend to question the culture or the things that the other types take for granted, and then you have those who are more inclined to copy and imitate, and then there are those that tend to, like, some of them copy everything new and follow the trends, and others are more like they are indoctrinated in what they did when they were children, and then they stick with that in a kind of conservative way and tend to resist changes and things like that. So there's always an element of culture, of hypnotization, of assumptions. But yeah, the way that these are expressed, and often these repeating patterns are often things that go under this social pattern type rearing. So yeah, like some people will use socialism through a kind of victimization. Others will do it like Meritum will use it as a way to improve society. Like, this is something to fight for. It will improve society. And then you have fiducia might be very intellectual about it, like try to improve it by improving the ideas or something like that. But even, every culture has its like subcultures that tends to be in conflict with it. So for example, if we take in almost every culture, in every European culture, even if every European culture is like different, you always have this kind of nationalistic movements, or like neo-Nazis, smaller groups, within every country, and they tend to be a specific type, often excidium and meritemic magnitudinum, for example.
Yeah, the masculine types, as you call them, tend to, and on those two, the most like psychopathic, masculine, disagreeable types.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even they within themselves can argue a lot. So like the magnitudinums often want to, they are focused on competency, and they can be annoyed with the excidiums for being too careless, to draw bad publicity by being a bit criminal, ruthless, and the excidiums are annoyed by the magnitudinums for being a bit too intellectual or geeky, or not enough revolutionary spirit and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So every culture will exhibit the types in one way or the other. Doesn't matter what type of culture it is. I think for given a culture that the person grows up in, the types will come out or exhibit in one way or the other, because there will be those basic tendencies that are specific to certain types.
Yeah. So I think that is enough for that question. The next one is, why do types exist?
Yeah, and I was thinking this might be. I was thinking this is related probably to It would be related. It's kind of it basically is related to timeless principles and stuff like that. Like when I think of reciprocal maintenance and all that kind of stuff, when it comes to supporting and helping each other. But then it made me think of like the conflict and stuff like that. And one thing I didn't like take into consideration a long time ago was the reality of contrast and stuff like that. The conflict, I think, arises from the being unaware of the timeless principles in the first place. So, like, I feel like if society was already like constructed around timeless principles and stuff like that, people then would become aware of the necessity of the opposites and stuff like that. They would become aware of the necessary polarity and contrast between types, and that usually what one type's strength is also their weakness, which then is made up for the opposite's strength, which is then their weakness as well. So then they help and cooperate with each other through making up for each other's strengths and weaknesses. So like I also thought that the main point of it then was to also generate experiences. It's to make humanity, I guess, more interesting and make life more interesting and fun in general. Like to just cause a lot of new things to happen.
Yeah, that's the way I like to look at it. But that perspective has that's like a philosophical perspective of intent, and we cannot be sure that the universe is aware or has a kind of intent, like there's a God as such, that intended for things to be that the way things are is because of some specific human-like intention. So an alternative to that is to think of it as some kind of necessity by cosmic law. Like in order for things to evolve and manifest the way they do, they still need to retain something of the basic components of reality. And so if we can reduce reality to like 9 qualities that develop from the 3 principles, or the 4 principles that I postulate, which are more like metaphysical, meaning that they may not necessarily be something concrete, but the next step, the 9 analogies, like organs in the universe that exist at different planes, like fractals, they are more like where things start to manifest. So that's why I think that in ancient like religions, like the Norse mythology, they speak of these 9 principles as worlds, and like the world tree and things like that. So then the fact that things must exist, they must have some kind of physical-like component, or at least be analogous to the physical. So in human beings, that would be like the Moram types. And then within there also must be something that is close to consciousness, to the abstract, and that's the sapientium types. And then something that is manifests this movement or motion or life force in general, and that is the Gratum types. And then my hypothesis then is that you have these reflections of each in each sphere, and that's how you get 9, and that's how you kind of get these 9 fundamental energies, and that they in some ways exist in every complete phenomena or organism, or so for example, going back to your example with apes, like gorillas and these chimpanzees, yeah, and bonobos and orangutans, they would be basically, each species of ape would represent one of these energies, or perhaps if there are more than 9 apes, I think they are, then you can think of configurations and things like that. I don't know if that's a good example, but I mean, that's a hypothetical example that you could perhaps apply this model to as well. I don't know. I've only used it for typology mostly.
Well, if you speak about necessity, then like the counter example of that would be like, if it is necessary, then it has to be that way. But does it have to be that way? Could we think of it being another way? And if we can't, then like if it's impossible for us to imagine it to be another way, then I think you could like argue for it being a necessity. Do you follow what my thought there?
So you mean that if we can imagine human beings as a life form without all of these 9 qualities or types, then they are not necessary.
Yeah.
Well, that's not really how I think, how I use the term necessity, but it's more like, I mean, it's the way the universe and existence is configured, which we don't really know. I mean, this is philosophical, hypothetical when I say necessity. So I don't think we can simply say based on what we can imagine. it's not that kind of necessity. It's a necessity we don't fully understand. I guess I would put it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's a necessity that makes it that like it has to be this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that's what I perhaps would say to the question of why do types exist.
Okay. And also on why do types exist? What I found interesting on this question is my experience. You know, in the African cultures, you have totems. You would have, for instance, a clan or a group of people who refer to themselves as the lion people, the crocodile people, or the elephant people. I think these things, human types, also exist in a way to kind of show us how we interconnect with the world. For instance, these clans now will refer to themselves as the lion people or the crocodile people or the antelope people, would sort of take it maybe even sometimes literally as though their families originate from the antelope, you know. I think in a way, these types help us or facilitate that we connect with the world around us in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's like perhaps yes, I was saying I was thinking that on the lower right corner of the model you can see many parallels with the animal kingdom, even though it's not exactly that way. But when you look at the more sapientian influence types and more up the model, and also urbanum in certain ways, you don't find the same parallels in animals. So perhaps perhaps part of the problem is that many of our like closest ancestors as a species having its extinct, so we can really pin it down to genetics. So maybe there is some divine component that we don't really understand. Perhaps, well, I don't understand, but like we could for example map out the necessity of types like corpus and libidinum, which are adjacent to Ethidium, as a necessity of, you know, when you have bigger numbers, you make a group stronger and more likely to survive in certain circumstances when you need cooperation, because Ethidium types are more disagreeable. And that's where you have the origin, for example, of Gradum. But how do you explain Sapientium, for example? Like I mean, because Gradum and Ethidium also have the capacity to think and to, invent things. But that eschizoid and escapistic tendency, like, why does it exist in humans? You know, because if you think about it in the primitive state, survival scale, like if you are too sensitive, aren't you at higher risk of dying? You know, so that's something that I also think about, you know. So why is it convenient, evolutionary speaking, to have like a very sensitive type, you know?
Yeah, so that's a criticism of the evolutionary theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the way I try to explain it, that these qualities arise in human beings, that's not like an evolutionary explanation, but more like, yeah, these cosmic, like human beings are like the reflection of fundamental cosmic features that must permeate everything in a sense. And the fact that they perhaps do not permeate through animals would be then that animals are perhaps are at a lower level or a lower form of being, so to speak. So because when I think
the higher level, the more permeating it would be.
Yeah, the higher level, it's like, I don't know, human beings are, yeah, it's like they are the most out of all the living aspects. I mean, it's like evolution has been, whatever evolution is, has been going in the direction of the human being, and human being is like the latest and more advanced form that finally connects to these abstract parts of reality that previous animals did not have. So yeah, that's also why I'm thinking that these functions like sensitivity, like focus on abstraction and possibilities and things like that in the Sapientium types and Misericordium you have then this, it's like the fruit of this evolution that finally connects to these more remote or spiritual or divine qualities of reality in a living organism, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
See, the way I like to analogy I would use, for instance, it would look like you see, if you take maybe you take a radio, a television set, or a computer. It's like the human being is the one that can attach to the life force and exhibit the greatest and reflect it back the most, while these other animals can probably connect to it, but then can reflect back a little less than the most that can be reflected. Yeah, I think it's more like that. Even if you look at the fact that animals can't reason like we humans can do, it means that we can actually form this consciousness and reflect this consciousness more than what animals can,
Yeah, I was thinking of how human beings also are part more godlike in that sense, and they can create. Because you're going to think about technology and all of these things, they can put out their own creations and create their own worlds and all of this, and animals don't have that capacity. For example, fiction literature is an example of human beings coming up with their own, or video games that are in fictional worlds and all of this, and animals don't do this. Yeah.
Yeah, like novelty and storytelling and
Yeah.
Yeah, animals I don't think have that.
And another way to think of these 9 qualities or energies is that they are like the more complex something is, the more complex. I mean, you can have very simple life forms that doesn't need a heart or a brain, but the more complicated an animal gets, the more it needs to have all of these organs, like the heart and the brain and lungs and liver, and they need to cooperate and in order for the organism to function and be more complicated. So with the human being, the human species, you have the types representing something analogous to like organs, where some types are more specialized in the equivalent of the brain in an organism, and others more equivalent to the heart, and others more to the liver and stomach and things like that, or the sexual organs.
Yeah. I was saying like in the same. I mean, there is another system that perhaps I think you have talked about it before with me in private, but there is a parallel of like the heart, the head, and the gut centers, for example, in what's called the Enneagram. For example, you have those 3 centers, and in other systems as well.
Yeah, and I think it comes from Aristotle or some
Yeah,
Greek.
every model has those 3 essential aspects.
So should we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
What are their functions? Oh, so now we come to what are these functions and why do these functions exist? Well, the why is this. I think we've answered that. Or did you think of something else there, Christian?
I was saying maybe after we explain what the functions are, then it would postulate into why. But I mean, it's connected with the other question too. So I mean, they're kind of like hand in hand almost, because yeah, I think we've already pretty much explained the why. It's just identifying what they are, I guess. So, and for example, when I was thinking of fiducium, and then when I think of the sapientium types, like that's the most unique feature, I guess, of the human beings. So then when I think of when you say that fiducium is the localization and it's focused on fantasy and imagination, Gian was just talking about how like the most unique feature to human beings is that they can create their own world and storytell and like be very imaginative and creative, and that's basically what fiducium is at its core, as like an intellectual energy. It can, that's why it gets lost in imagination and fantasy, because it can create that. It can, that's the energy and what it can do, I guess, which is then like its weakness, I guess at the same time, because even though it can create all these fantastic things and like think up of crazy ideas and stuff like that, they can almost get lost in them and then not even be able to distinguish that from reality. Whereas then you have other types that can make up for that. Where, for example, you have magnitudinum that can discern truth and like gather and collect facts, and then abstractum, which is more focused on digesting and contemplating ideas and stuff like that, which gives more substance then. So then if you have all three working together, you have fiducium coming up with all these ideas and stuff like that, and then magnitudinum could be like collecting all the information that's true from that and laying out like some type of model or something. They have abstractum, which can contemplate the ideas further and like ground them, I guess, in a more concrete kind of way. So it goes even from like a more mental and to a more concrete level, I guess. Like it goes down in a staircase, even when you're going across in the sapientium sphere. Whereas when you have the expansive, like imaginative energy going down to a more concrete, focused kind of level. Even when you go down from sapientium to gradum and then to morum. So that's how I think of like the functions working together, and at the same time, like what their functions are and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love the way you put it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I've got much to add there.
I mean,
okay, I don't have anything to add there. I think.
I guess
I
even
like
when
the
you
way
look at
you.
the I guess even when you look at the gradum and morum sphere, it kind of works the same way going across. Like misrecordum, it's more in-depth feeling, whereas then it gets more towards the surface, I guess. When you go towards urbanum and libidinum, it gets more of a concrete kind of love and more surface level, whereas then with misrecordum, it gets more deep and intellectual. Whereas then with meritum and stuff like that, it's more of a high authoritative kind of like governing aspect, and then it goes into more lower and simple concrete levels, and then you get exidium, which is the most primitive, raw and vulgar energy quality, I guess. But I think meritum and exidium could be similar in that they have the same sort of drive for power or something like that. Exidium into the rebelliousness and wanting to sort of have control over their own lives. And that was the weird thing I found with Ted Kaczynski, and why he probably does have exidium secondary, is because he was focused on autonomy, and then that he mainly thought that the social structures we have doesn't give us the freedom to have control over our lives. And I feel like that's the main aspect exidium wants, is the control over their own life and what they do, and not having limitations. Whereas then meritum imposes those limitations and governing rules, and wants to have enough authority to be able to do that and have people follow through with rules and regulations and stuff. So it's kind of like higher and then to lower too.
Sure.
Yeah. Also, now that you think about it, I'm also thinking about like kind of a similar comparison between fiducian and abstractum, in the sense that fiducian types, for example, kind of know no limits when it comes to their intellect, as in they want to, for example, I know Elon Musk wants to take humanity to the moon. I mean, not to the moon, but to the space, sorry, to the other planets, and find other planets that have potential for life. So in the sense, he might envision some form of like planetary, like network of planets, like interconnected by technology and teletransportation. Like you see a lot of that in fiducian literature, you know, teletransportation and space traveling. So it's kind of that more, I guess, godlike energy, as in we want to go to different places and have different organs in ourselves that can like generate more creation.
Yeah,
kind of. Yeah.
I think of it as like they have the awesome ideas, but then like no concrete way to actually like put it into action. You know, like it's great ideas, and like it would be awesome if we could, but then how do we actually get it done? Like how can we do it?
I think that's kind of where meritum also falls in line, because meritum might be putting these restrictions as because in their minds they might be thinking of the ideas that they want to see in the world, and that's why they come across as rigid and all of this, because it's the Obsidian part that they also have.
Yeah, that's where I could also think, like when it comes to magnitudinum and they're focused on facts and stuff like that. It's like if a fiducium type does have some kind of like idea that they want to put in a concrete way, it's like if magnitudinum types have like enough facts or something, they could like lay that out and give actual
kind of
possible
make it a
possibilities.
reality.
which
Yeah,
then
make
can
it
be
a
like
reality.
passed on to like the lower parts, so you get into culture and stuff, which then is implemented by Meritum types, and then urbanum types like adapt to ideas and become more agree. And I think that's how they become experts, is that because they're agreeable with knowledge and stuff like that, and they have good memory and stuff like that, then it's easy for them to learn and then rise higher and higher in status. So then they become like experts and stuff like that,
They
because
become like catalysts.
yeah, exactly. So then it can all be spread out and then implemented and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that abstractum, for example, has like, it's in a similar way to magnitudinem, wants to make sure that like that the knowledge is realistic and can be brought into reality, but abstractum has a lot more of that purification of knowledge and unbiased, you know, so that the ideas don't become like dysfunctional, you know, because magnitudinem can fall into that black and white thinking similar to meritum, but more schizoid, I guess, where the ideas actually become not dysfunctional and they don't even see it. Yeah.
So how did you view the similarity between fiducium and abstractum? Because you drew a parallel
I was saying
between.
that Ethidium, I was saying that, in Meritum is more like has this kind of need to expand outwards, whereas,
Meritum.
Meritum, Meritum wants to expand outwards, and hence it puts a lot of restrictions on people so that they work in a way that can facilitate that spread of creation, that spread of advancement. Whereas Ethidium doesn't care about the advancement, doesn't care about any of that. That is more cynical about those possibilities and just wants to live in the moment. And abstractum, in a similar way, has a more slowly advancing but unbiased way of seeing, you know, concepts and creations, whereas fiducian kind of knows no limits, and in that way they can become delusional about the functionality of their own ideas. And in a similar way, meritum might not see that and become tyrannical in that way with laws and regulations.
Okay, so you're saying, basically, to summarize it, the similarity between meritum and excidium, the two polarities, are that they are kind of into control.
Yeah, that's what I think.
The similarity with fiducium and abstractum is that they are kind of they are not so practical. They get lost in their imaginations in different ways.
Yeah.
And the equivalent for misericordem and libidinem would be something like compassion, I think. Or like both are kind of sensitive, both can play the victim, something related to that perhaps.
Yeah, whereas then it seems like the types in the middle are more balanced. So like magnitudum, for example, with the facts and all that stuff, and
yeah,
then
they are the middle row
with
is,
the adaptable build.
Yeah, I think the middle row is very much focused on a kind of competency.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Even-
like
even-
to think of it in terms of the columns. I would say the left column is a compounding column. It's adding things upon, and the middle row is like a maintenance column, keeping things to what they are.
Yeah, exactly.
And the far right row is the grinding, the consuming column. That one is eating away. So the far right, your abstractum is like a hyena. They grind into things and they want break bones and get to the bone marrow, you know. The
You
far
mean
right. And
excidium?
the middle one is just maintenance.
Ethidium.
No,
I think
I
you meant
mean,
Ethidium. Hyenas Ethidium.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, well, excidium in the physical sense. I meant abstractum in terms of like concepts and stuff.
thought
Because they want to
digesting.
break things and really digest. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But
I know what you
in
mean.
the physical sense, excidium. Well,
There is that
don't forget
cynical.
the libidinums there in the middle.
Yeah, you were even
You know, they also want to taste.
even when
You are
it comes
knowledge.
to
Yeah.
So I sometimes look at it in columns.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say the maintenance, sorry to return to the question, because like corpus is the factory worker archetype in that sense, and the farmer, and those are the ones that maintain, I guess, that work aspect and maintain the culture and more traditional. And urbanum types also have this phenomenon where even though they can be very adaptable and flexible, like there is this morality in the gradum sphere where it creates this cancel culture that you can also see it in libidinem, but you can also see a lot in urbanum, like Leafy is here, where he will be criticizing people that are not like socially acceptable. For example, the girl that wanted to have sex with a dog and something like that. Like, yeah, when he was criticizing her for being inappropriate and putting her down. So yeah, I agree with that maintenance. Yeah.
Yeah, even types with
Also,
urbanum.
want confirmed knowledge. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
even types with urban
confirmed, so they don't want to reach out and get something new, or they want that which is confirmed. You know, yeah. But I wonder at times, can it be possible to force oneself to sort of roam around? I mean, okay, try and move. Okay, maybe mentally. Consider the nine blocks. I mean, when you're doing something, and try and maybe imitate that kind of energy. Say, if I were to look into this matter as an abstract
Ideal.
Yeah, I think you
Something
can do
like
that short term, but when the their strength is to be like that consistently. So like if you were to act like an Exidium, you might pull it off for a short while, but then your energy would be like you couldn't function as an Exidium day to day, or something like that.
Yeah, but okay, yeah. Well, I hear you. I think if you are just being yourself.
Yeah, that gets into question sets as
Sorry?
well. Yeah. This also gets into question sets if they are an inherent or a result of culture and genetics. As if, for example, saying if we are taught to try to be like Exidiums, this is a culture that is very Exidium. But like some types are just not going to be able to do it as well as others. Like some people are not going to be able to do it as well as others, which implies that it's the result of not culture, that it's something genetic or something inherent to us. Question sets, yeah.
I see.
Well, yeah, that's when I think of like the purpose of human beings in general. Like if the purpose is to be yourself, then the question of having to imitate another type, like unless there's some practical reason, I don't see. No, it's not. But I mean,
it's not you.
But it's a.
Okay, Christian.
It's
I think that what Embulelo means is that you can learn things from other types. You can learn.
The type is not you. It's the signal. It's the. I would say the type is like the signal. Is the channel. Is the TV channel you are on. It's not you. That's what I think of. That's how I think of a type. It's like the TV channel you are on. It's not you. It's not you. The essential you. So why not step back a little bit, go around these 9 TV channels and just check, because it's not you. The type is not you. Essentially you.
Yeah.
Do you disagree on that?
Yeah, there is one thing that I think is important to bring up in relation to that, and that is that, I mean, in some sense, these energies, the fact that we have gotten these energies as a kind of fuel must mean something. And I do think that people gain a sense of substance in being allowed to release that energy. Sometimes when you try to imitate another energy, then there's a risk that you might be blocking the energy that you have and things like that. But I mean, it depends on, like, I'm also thinking about how if we take some examples, you can, like, if you are to imitate fiduciam, I mean, you could go into your mind and focus on imagination and things like that, but are you really going to be as imaginative? I mean, if this is like a cosmic aspect or a fundamental energy, then those thoughts and ideas will come very natural to a fiduciam. And it's very difficult to imitate something like that, making inventions. It requires a certain amount of enthusiasm for that and talent for that most people do not necessarily have. Now, there may be some aspect of these energies which you can imitate and which you can learn and which could be useful and healthy to adopt from each type. So I think that there's a little bit of both. It can be a good thing, and it might be possible to, for example, a Misericordiam may be able to get over their sensitivity by adopting a bit of the insensitivity of the Exidium. Try to care a little bit less. They may be able to,
basically, like if you for something to interrupt you. Yeah.
No, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I mean,
you
you
don't
have
think
Ethereum secondary, so for me, accessing that part has been really helpful in the sense that I used to be very scared of the idea of having sex or kissing people, even will disgust me. But then I kind of just, like, by listening even to music that Ethereum types make and watching videos of Ethereum types, I just was able to access that part of myself. And now I'm able to just have relationships and go around the world and don't feel as squeamish or, like, irrationally fearful of things.
Yeah, yeah. So there are some there is like one like spiritual aspect that I think you should try to learn from each type. Not being too sensitive.
Yeah, that's where
Being a bit more loyal and giving up your autonomy, like with Corpus, and try to strive a little higher, like Meritum, and try to have a little more fun and letting go, like Libidinem, and perhaps try to adapt and be a bit more professional, like Urbanum, and things like that, so that you and try to be a bit more passive, like abstract. Not everyone doesn't need to do overwork all the time and things like that. So I think there are things that people can learn, and that each type are like an example of that. Yeah, but at the same time, there is also a certain talent that you simply cannot consistently adopt. Like you will never be as thick-skinned as a Morem type, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Oh, well, I agree. I agree. I think I
Okay,
agree
so yeah, and I mean, you brought up this with reciprocal maintenance. That's like a perspective to look at this from why they exist. That it is possible to experience more and for human beings to be more and to realize more if they because they are complementary. If this is a unique aspect of human beings compared to other types, then that is part of why we have been so successful, that we are composed of different types with different talents. And there are also surprise and experiences and contrasts that Christian brought up, that I think is a good attitude to have. Like, I mean, if the universe is conscious and if it has a desire to experience things, then perhaps it has set in motion this process of evolution and things like that, so that it will get to experience being us, so to speak, having these unpredictable experiences. And then you have motion, that things should be moving, and I think we can keep this in mind as we go into some of the other questions. You don't have experiences and these kind of things if things are stagnant. So the fact that you have also a bit of conflict, and that no society remains stable is partly because of types, and that perhaps there is a bit of an aspect of their function that they should continue to make societies change so that they don't become too rigid and stagnant.
Yeah, that's where I think of, even if society were like built on human types and we even have it built on timeless principles, then like even when people are expressing themselves authentically, and I would think all the energies by nature would just balance each other out, and at the same time it would keep the recurring like conflicts in society and stuff like that. It's just that people would be like more aware of like why it's happening, so then it would be taken a little bit less seriously, and maybe it wouldn't become too it wouldn't cause too much suffering, I guess. Like there would still be conflicts and maybe pain and suffering, but it wouldn't be. We'd be aware of the reason why it's happening, I guess. We'd be aware of the inherent function, I guess, it has. Like that's like the look or view of it, I guess. But I feel like even if people were aware of it, the main point is like if people were aware of the timeless principles and like had self-knowledge, the stuff you were saying would still happen. It would still be necessary to have conflicts and order and stuff like that, and chaos and all this stuff. Like it wouldn't stop, because then emotion would stop. Everything would just cease to happen and things wouldn't really be going. So
that sounds like the Buddhist idea that suffering is like essential or something. I don't remember exactly how it was formulated, but suffering is what keeps the motion of the human being. Like that's what makes us do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that makes me that just makes you think of the polarities now, like the point that they can't, that not one polarity can stay together, basically.
So I'm sorry, add to that suffering part, because I really have a lot to say about that. I think, well, yeah, it's that suffering is a driving force of life, but what makes suffering have a point, or have a purpose, is to give meaning to it. So in that sense, these energies kind of give us a greater sense that things exist for a reason, or things happen for a reason, because when there is suffering and you don't see the reason for it, and you don't think it, then that's where suffering is awful.
Yeah, I want to agree with you that suffering is not that awful. Suffering is okay. Suffering is okay. How do I say that? If I had taken time to write down the problems or issues I had and was trying to solve on my own before, like I got in touch with timeless education. Okay, when I look back at those things, I'm like, wow, the kind of psychological relief I have now, compared to the situation that was then. I look back and I'm somehow almost grateful I went through that, but it didn't feel like that at the time,
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying suffering is not that bad.
So did you
maybe
try
it's
to
just
reduce suffering before? Was that your main goal then?
Sorry, say again?
Did you try to get rid of suffering before you found timeless education?
Yes, I tried to. Because my suffering basically was around questions about life and what everybody's doing and what people believe in, and was very skeptical, and I actually felt people don't really know what they're talking about and so on. So I suffered a lot, and I couldn't get somebody to answer, and people had answers, but I knew they were bad answers. That's how I suffered. So I wanted to get out of it. I really wanted to get out of it, and now that I've gotten out of it, I look back at that suffering and I feel like, you know what? I'm a little grateful also about that suffering. It was not bad. It's actually good that I went through it. It sort of pushed me to get here, So
yeah, that's the
I
meaning.
wouldn't be cry
now
over it and so
had a reason. Had a reason to be.
So it had a reason, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's also important to remember that we are talking about suffering as it arises from conflict with different types, but that's not the only source of suffering. A lot of stuff happens without our without us doing it. Like even societies are not. It's not like human beings are planning societies, and that we have the society we have today because we have planned it or something, or we have just planned it badly. It's more like we have this society because it happened. We brought up this when we talked about Ted Kaczynski, the industrial society and its future, and he talks a lot about this, that you cannot plan a society and have it function like you expect it to. It's more like everything has arisen due to specific circumstances, and then conflict arises within that context.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to the next question here. Why are people not aware? This was a bit of a strange question. You have to explain this one, Christian. Why are people not aware of their own and others' different psychology, their own and others' type?
Yeah, because I was thinking of like the amount of conflict, which I mean, I guess it could be that maybe people are aware of it and they just dislike it. Then I was thinking when it comes to lack of self-knowledge and stuff like that, then why, like, how come that happens? How come like people aren't really aware of how different they are from other people, or aren't aware of even how their own psychology works and stuff like that. So I thought that was just an interesting thing to think about. So like I was writing down the questions, I thought that might be something to bring up.
And what did you answer?
Well, basically what I answered is that It could be a case that the reason why could be like a lack of interest in people in general, and that when it comes to the types, I mean, 6 out of the 9 types aren't even really people-oriented types or environment people-focused types. And I'm talking about Sapientium and Morum types. The Morum types, for example, are more thick-skinned and focused on hard work. And then when I think of like I mean, we're always interacting with people anyways, but then I think of like they're more focused on their own desires and stuff like that. So when it comes to like,
yeah, but I think corpus can be included in I think corpus is kind of focused on people. It tends to be loyal and focused on the community and
right, but I don't think of it as like them trying to learn about people, I guess, or trying to gather some kind of understanding of them. Whereas then
superficial.
Yeah, whereas when it comes to Sapientium types, I mean, because they're focused on understanding in general, then there may be more of an interest. But like I think of it, since they're more escapistic and more in their head and into creativity and knowledge, they're not too much focused on the environment and other people either. So then because of that, that may lead to like lack of knowledge of other people and curiosity and just learning about other people, which then may lead to like being unaware of like how other people work and what other people's types are and stuff, which is I think why we've had this problem like throughout history, maybe with just typologies and getting typologies accurate and understanding people in general. That seems to be the biggest struggle, which it seems like like we seem to I mean, nowadays it seems like it's more focused on, but even in the past, like it seemed like it was something trivial to like learn to learn about other people or to try to understand their psychology, unless you count philosophy and religion as trying to understand that.
But would you say that the Radom sphere is tends to be more interested in their own psychology?
Yeah, I would think they would be more focused on people in general. Like out of all the other types, the primary types, like I think the Gradum types. So I think the Gradum types are a little bit more interested. Like even when it comes to urbanum and self-mastery and expertise and stuff like that, I feel like they're more interested in the way they come across and how they are and stuff. So they have to focus more on people and what people want, what they desire, what they crave. So then, which leads to a little bit more of an understanding of people. And then when it comes to Mr. Cordum, the empathy and compassion, wanting to understand other people and listen to other people talk about their issues and problems and stuff, that's already learning then about other people. And then libidinum with I would think of like the spontaneity and having fun and wanting to try all kinds of things. They're going to encounter loads of different other people and stuff like that, you know. Versus maybe the Morum types or the Sapientium types. Even Meritum types can be like isolated, I guess, and closed off from other parts of society, just like Exidium types can be. And even though Corpus is somewhat social and engaging, they can still not have as much curiosity about other people. So I think Sapientium types though could have somewhat of an interest in other people, but it'd probably be like in a different way, I guess.
Yeah,
well, it's interesting.
Like it wouldn't be the social context. It would be more of like actually trying to understand people, like how they function and work.
I
agree with you. You want to say something, Andreas?
Yeah, I would probably say that the Sapientium types are interested in human psychology and understanding people, but they tend to be too theoretical and remote and not so engaged with people that theories can be a bit inaccurate. And then the Gratum types do tend to be interested in people, but they often they have a kind of fear of people, so they don't want to be too honest. They want to fit in more, so it becomes a risk of superficiality within their interaction. Perhaps not quite as superficial as Corpus, who is more focused on the practical, just eating together and I don't know, they can have an interest in like playing music in a band, for example, and things like that. But yeah, basically the Morum types are a bit rigid, and especially Meritum and Exedium can be a bit remote from, especially if they are like leaders and things like that. Or you have antisocial Exedium, and you have like a more kind of remote elitist in Meritum, who is like taking a lot of responsibility, but it's not meeting people, ordinary people. They think they are taking responsibility, but they are not in contact with the ordinary person, so that there becomes a kind of disconnect there. And yeah, of course, the Morum types are desensitized. They don't really feel the same need for thinking, and does not analyzing people or think they need to understand people. They just think they need to tell people to just go do this now, be useful and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where I think of, like, when you talk about lack of experience in general, I feel like then if people, like, if timeless education, like, were a part of society, then like it would encourage people then to be more open and receptive, and like try to engage with the world and engage with other people and engage with society in general, which can increase understanding of our psychology and all this stuff.
I was also gonna add that everyone has the three energies, like, and also knowing like which energy you have is also helpful in that sense. For example, Meritum types have a Gradum energy in their configuration. I know, for example, this writer Linda Skrug, I think was her name, from Sweden. She has Libidinem in her configuration, and she used to listen to this Mr. Recordem guy's music in this band, Brother Danny or something like that. And to one point, and then I think she just found them too emotional, and she thought they were immature and dropped them at one point. So that's an example of how you can like channel your energies a little more and don't get too lost in the main one. I think that's something that Exedium types also do. Like Exedium types that are into the art world, for example, I've known many that can have more of that emotional side when they bring their Gradum energy a little more out, like libidinemic, like Elliot Hulse, who is very into coaching people, or some artist like Axl Rose, who like has more emotional content in his lyrics because he has Mr. Recordem or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question then is, why are people not completely aware of how their psychology is made up? So this is about people themselves. And I mean, my answer to that would be that I think that people are not completely aware of their own psychology is because it is very complex. I mean, even if you try to answer some of the question that I ask of people, they do need to think a lot, and I have tried to answer it myself, and I know that it's difficult to like keep track of everything that you feel is you, and then try to look at what is most recurring versus what is not, and separate it from what is inspired by culture or habits that have come through the way you were raised and things like that.
Yeah, that was kind of my answer too. Like, it's just really, really complicated and very difficult.
And I also wrote that because perhaps also because we're living too much in it, like we are so familiar with it that we can't sometimes we cannot see it, because I do remember like some of you and some other people that I have talked with, and I have tried to understand their types, but what really made me realize what type they were when I saw them do something which they themselves never like mentioned. And with Frank, for example, it was his kind of rigidity where he seemed to not be able to relax when I met him in person. And recently I spoke to Aaron, this guy that we talked with. We talked about Ted Kaczynski in the last part. And he seemed to be, the way he described himself, seemed to be like he had a Mr. Recordem in him. But then he did something in chat that made me think more of Urbanum. And then he revealed some more things about himself, that he liked enthusiasm and energy in people. And that's not something he mentioned, but now I'm thinking that's sometimes what people do is more indicative of like what energy or type they are running on than what they say. because it is difficult to find the right words and like have a good objective picture of yourself.
Yeah, that's why I also wanted to say that sometimes meeting people in person, because sometimes and when you're on chat, when you are talking to people from a screen, there are things that you can really see. So making like interactions as real life contact approximate as possible, I think it's necessary in order to make people more aware of what their psychology is, and through exchange of observations, basically. Because the other issue that I've seen with this question is that, for example, the Enneagrammer universe, which is a typology group, they say that you don't know yourself well enough, and that's kind of like an underlying, like, is kind of a keystone principle of their teaching. So we know you better than you do, kind of like, as in you will make a collage with images, you will make a video of yourself, and then they will type you. And if you disagree, they will kind of rationalize what you're saying and fit their own view of you, which is kind of a form of control and gaslight, which can also like happen if you don't do it, in a compassionate and a helpful way, that is more open and back and forth. So making it like a real life conversation, like a real life getting to know someone, I think it's necessary to increase his awareness.
One thing that helped me like become more aware of my type, that Andreas, you helped me with, is that the fact that I just simply had to engage more with other people, that I couldn't try to analyze and think about my type in isolation. I had to go out and experience more and engage with people and compare myself with others, and through that I become more aware of like how I actually am in certain situations with different kinds of people and different types of people. So I think of like it's a part of like knowing yourself is like engaging with others and knowing how you are with other people, and at the same time you're learning about other people, because everyone you engage with is not exactly the same. So then you're having different reactions to different types of people. So and you're learning more about how you react to different types of people, and at the same time you're learning about how they react to you and what they're like and stuff. But the main point is engagement with other people. That's what I was missing, was the actual experiences with people, which is where I think the most knowledge about types can be gathered, is in the actual direct experience.
Yeah, and one more answer to that question was that sometimes people don't really become aware of their psychology because they are not. Their own psychology does not cause them enough pain to start to think about it. So I do think that those people who are more self-aware are also those who suffer more. So the more pain, and especially if the suffering is coming from your own kind of dysfunction and difficulty fitting in, then you start to think, what's wrong with me? And then you're trying to go inside and understand yourself. And it can be painful and cause a lot of depression, but at the same time, it does facilitate more self-awareness. And that's also a reason I think most people, because it seems that the majority of people just try to fit in and does not suffer that much, whereas those people who are like not so
like outcasts or like outsiders,
yeah, because it's often those people who are drawn to typologies and things like that as well. Like most people here are like Misericordam, except me and Pulelo.
And Pulelo, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I thought that was interesting too.
So the next question is why are societies structured based on only certain human psychological energies and instincts? Well, are they that? What were your thoughts there?
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Because I don't really know. Because now I'm starting to think it's like I think there are like certain biases in like cultures and societies, for example, like that some should be more focused on like harder work and working, and that to me seems more like a morum sphere kind of like bias. But I don't think it's just fixated on one type. Like it's just fixated on everyone should be like hardworking and focused on rules and governing and all that stuff, like Maritim types. But I think when it comes to spheres, like it could be that like there's a bias between certain spheres maybe that are more valued than other spheres, or even like there's a mixture in between some of them and then left out energies. Like today, for example, in the modern times, it's more focused on hard work, entrepreneurial work, and then like professional and being polite and kind and stuff like that. And I feel like that's very urbanum, maritum. Plus the wanting money and striving for material wealth makes me think a little bit of Exidium and like maybe even libidinum and stuff. More of the creative visionary too. It makes me think a little bit of fiducium. Like that's sort of biases where then like other types are sort of left out maybe, or their energies aren't valued as much.
Yeah. And I also think that the fundamental values of societies, like when countries are like founded, I think might be the reason. For example, this question made me think about how in the Constitution of the United States, it says freedom and the pursuit of happiness, for example, is part of it. And freedom is a value that I will say of Exidium, for example. Liberty, for example, is another word that American patriots use a lot. And the pursuit of happiness could be said to be some ideals, which might be come from a fiducian, might be, or just as a PMTamic aspect. So, and you see that, for example, in the Hollywood world or in the corporate America world, there is a lot of value of grit and hard work and being tough and and being kind of more socially skilled and useful, being basically an extrovert, but in the social sense and in the physical motor sense. So maybe types like magnitudinem, abstractum, and misericordem get kind of pushed to the side, and somewhat corpus as well, because they are not as like showy, and meritum is more comfortable just being elitist and kind of separating themselves. Whereas I would say fiducian, degradum types, and Exidium kind of, except misericordem, so libidinem, urbanum, fiducian, and Exidium are, I guess, more valued in American culture because of that kind of valuing of living life to the fullest and being out there. So because I will say that maybe the immigrants from Europe that created America were actually escaping from some of those limitations in their own culture there and their own problems there when they came here. And I know that there is also a saying that I heard, which I don't know if it's that true, but many marginal people from Europe, which I imagine had a lot of Exidium component, because Exidium types are usually excluded for their antisocial tendencies, or maybe some fiducian inventors that didn't find themselves satisfied, immigrated to America, or had to leave for different reasons because there were multiple migration waves from Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, and in Sweden we have a very strong corpus culture with equality, and nobody should stand out too much, and also this strong morality regarding paying taxes. And
Yeah.
like, corpus is like the archetypal exploited taxpayer in a way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I've experienced two types of these cultures. I would say my village culture where I grew up, they would there's more corpus. I'd say corpus, magnitudinem, and the benum. It must be a guy, that kid, that is helpful to society, who works together with others, who works very hard to support the family, and somebody who knows the rules of the traditions and so on, and can guide others on it. The village, I say the village culture I grew up in prioritizes those. But when you get into bigger cities, then you get these meritums, people who need to climbing corporate ladder and so on, which is sort of like, where are you going to? I mean, that's what's done there in big cities and so on. So I've seen those differences growing up. But in the village where I grew up, corpus, magnitudinem, and maybe a benum. But to somebody who's helpful to society, who can help others, who can work with others and support others, and who knows your traditions and your religion, and you can explain it to others, and you can keep others, in the religion. That's how I grew up.
Yeah. I may also put libidinem in there, because libidinem without Exidium can also be very helpful. Like, it's usually the libidinem with Exidium that it's more like selfish and scandalous and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next question is,
and I feel like some of the questions have been answered as well, like throughout most of the conversation.
Yeah, but regarding what we spoke about here about certain societies being more, I mean, I think that is that most people, most of the types perhaps, are kind of adaptable and are not so quick to complain. So it's like, I don't know, sometimes I have speculated that perhaps this whole subject only truly matters to like the more sensitive and dysfunctional types in a kind of conventional way, which it would be abstractum, misericordum, and perhaps magnitudinum. And because if you look at the other types, when they are interested in typologies, it's more like they just want to, it's like astrology. They just want to talk about categorizing people and talking about themselves, or talking about celebrities and what type they are, or know what type of person someone is when they are going on a dating site and want to date someone. So it's more for personal gain and just a kind of quirky interest. I mean, I understand it can be fun to look at typology that way, but like where it really is valuable, like we are talking about now, it's for people who take it more seriously, because it's connected to the fact that they have a need to understand themselves, because they don't know what to do with their lives. They are more vulnerable, or I'm not sure what the right word is, but
lost.
They are lost, exposed,
misguided.
Don't
know where you're going.
Yeah, they are in a bad position compared to other people. They cannot fool themselves into thinking that they are happy with the way things are, so to speak. So that's what I'm thinking sometimes, that perhaps this truly only matters to like abstractum and misericordum and the other types. If we were to bring this up to like leaders or something, they would be like it doesn't matter that much. Like people are adaptable.
Be stronger. Just believe in yourself.
Things like that. So, but
could there be a danger to the types for where it does matter, that you become attached to it too much?
Too much seeking after understanding yourself and things like that. I guess it can be that as well.
So I was thinking about a Night Stalker. I was thinking about Charles Manson and other Obsidian types that get more in tune with their trauma or their inward nature, and they become worse, like serial killers and all of that usually have those kind of manifestos or things of that sort. So I think that and my mother as well, when I talked to her about her trauma from Sendero Luminoso, who was like a terrorist organization, because she's afraid of violence and any form of conflict, and any form of screaming or haranguing makes her angry or disturbed. And when I ask, it's because of her trauma, and her heart starts palpitating like this very fast, and she feels like she's going to have a heart attack when she talks about it too much. So I feel like for some Moran types, perhaps introspecting too much is actually dangerous for them, as in they can literally like fuck themselves over. Like my mom can die, or Aaron can get like called by the police, because he says if he doesn't go on Discord, he will go in real life and do some antisocial thing and get put in jail, for example.
Yeah, but that's a slightly different thing, when it comes to trauma and things like that. I think that simply understanding like these energies and understanding yourself on a kind of energetic level and things like that shouldn't be too risky. But the reason we got into this conversation right now, it's that often people are drawn to understanding themselves because of trauma or something like that. But I'm not thinking exactly of trauma, but more like there is something in that these more sensitive types feel in their nature, like they are blaming themselves a little bit, like why am I like this, like something is wrong with me, and that's how they
like not realizing that their energies aren't necessarily like have a traumatic origin or something, but they're more like just
Yeah.
inherent parts that aren't like
Like they are
acknowledged for
defects or
being like
something.
that. Yeah. Like I remember you were talking about how it's kind of like when people get diagnosed with autism and then people like tell other people that they have autism. It's like, oh, okay, we get you now. You just have autism. It's kind of like the same thing with energy types. It's like, oh, well, it's not because there's something wrong with me. It's just because I'm running on, like I have misrecordum as a primary energy. And then like if you were to tell people that, they'd be like, oh, that's why you do what you do. It's not because of trauma. It's not because of
or because you're inferior.
it's just because that's just what your energy is, I guess, or that's what you have. So that's how I think of like if people were to become more aware of that and human types became some kind of like scientific field or something, that's how people would start to type each other. Like that's how they would look at each other. It's like, oh, that they have urbanum primary or they have libidinum primary. And it's not the cause of those types isn't because of trauma or because of personal experiences or something. It kind of goes back to how types even occur, originate, and stuff like that.
So the next question is, why do some societies value ideology and behavior codes over authenticity?
Because they suffer less, so they might not have the necessity to enter like inwardly. But I also wanted to also say something about like following what you were saying about sensitivity. I find that the misericordum, abstractum, and magnitudinem, to a certain degree triad, has sensitivity to physical pain and frustration and also emotional emotional disturbance. That's the kind of sensitivity I will say. Abstractum not so much as misericordum. Misericordum is the most sensitive in this sense, but corpus has psychological sensitivity, I will say, and libidinem to like things that are too disturbing or violent or complex. So I will say there is more of a weakness of the mind, I will say, in these types. So I guess that's why for them it's easy to adapt and more easy to embrace ideology or to follow the rules than to question things too much, because they start themselves like hurting themselves to think too much. I feel like I can take in a lot of psychological damage and you sit with it for hours, even though I'm not moving around. But if you, let's say, punch me, I'm quick to like lose my shit and become dysfunctional, for example.
Like I think even going into the mental world and stuff like that isn't. It's kind of like risky. I think like it's a it's a very complex world and it's very. I think it can be dangerous at times. Like it can be really risky and scary, sort of, to like go through your mind and question things and really.
Yeah, I mean, to me it isn't. I love like being very abstract and eccentric, whereas my mother is very scared of everything that I do. In my paintings, she hates them. She thinks they are scary and satanic, and she just has nightmares about just by looking at them. So, like, I think that also defining that like looking at sensitivity as a psychological sensitivity or physical vital sensitivity is also a way to understand it. And types that are more insensitive physically and emotionally, but also like more sensitive in the psychological and complex aspect, might value ideology and behavior codes over authenticity, because going inwards is too painful.
Yeah, but authenticity is not really related necessarily to going inwards. I'm thinking more of authenticity as speaking your mind and not giving into your fear that you need to fit in, but more like you are releasing whatever it is you feel you need to or want to do, in a sense, as long as it is not coming from a pathological origin. And often things become more pathological the more you repress things.
But yeah, I think it has to do with like perceived loss and sensitivity to like, because the reason why people don't want to be authentic is often because they perceive that they will lose, like they have something they will lose, like security or sanity or whatever, like and it could also be like part of the brainwashing is appealing to like oh, if you don't think like this, then you like horrible things will happen. And if you're a neurotic, maybe you're more prone to believe that. And I don't know. So like seeing what people think they will lose by leaving the program.
Is it not maybe caused by things like religion, where people tend to think that there are standard acceptable norms meant for everyone, which norms are according to maybe a certain religion, that anything that deviates from that religion shouldn't be, is not the right way. Maybe that's because of following religions. You can't just be, for instance, in some religions, we for instance, you're seen as a sinner. So from the word go, there's something wrong with you.
I think it's
in that.
Yeah, I think it comes from people projecting their energy. I think 1 second. So people projecting their energy, as in they themselves perceiving themselves that sort of fear of the unknown, or fear of intellectual complexity, that kind of like sissy-mindedness, as Andreas calls it, and they believe that they assume that other people are also like them, and they also have this need of safety, because safety is a huge, because something that I've noticed, like a lot of people tell me that they feel unsafe around me because I'm so eccentric, because they have a lot of fear around too much complexity. So I think that this is why religion is appealing to them, because you also have to understand, like, and they might be a subconscious need to take vengeance, as in because I feel weak in the mind, and I don't see the same weakness in you. Perhaps now I don't want you to go to that place. You need to be here, like with everyone else, with all of us together, or you're separating yourself. So it's that fear of separation, that fear of being different, that fear of the unknown, because it brings chaos and instability. That fear of death, you can say, which is the opposite of safety. So
yeah, so it's a fear-based response, you would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you can easily lose your job if you tell your boss exactly what you think. I mean,
yeah.
If
you lose your job, you're a loser, in quotation marks. You're, a leech. People already put labels on all of it. So
yeah,
it's losing
so
stability.
my answer to that, I wrote down a little bit here about just that, but it's coming from different directions. So for the elites, it becomes like a tool for manipulation. It's very convenient for them that they can, have ideology or behavior codes in order to like serve the system, have people serve the system. And then conservative people, I guess they are more like you said, or it could also be due to a kind of hypnosis, cultural hypnosis, that they are so used to it. They don't like to change their ways. And and with progressives, there are sometimes you have this behavior codes in like social justice warriors, which is almost a bit I don't know, because of a kind of hysteria or fear that something bad will happen if they don't change society. They don't like suffering, so that's like that's very Gratum-ish, I think, and conservative, so more like.
But also there's a moral judgment in, like, because I have a fear, like in my universities, sometimes I have a fear of expressing my opinion because I feel like I will be judged as evil by my classmates or by my and for me that is like a big fear for some reason.
Yeah, that's why I dropped out of mine, because everyone thought I was evil because of how I dress and all my opinions, everything about me, basically.
The next question is, why have societies failed up to today to stay stable, functional, and healthy? But I think, we answered this. We have been talking about how, also because of human types themselves, things are always changing. And that's also part of why societies change over time and why they fail. But sometimes they also fail because of circumstances and because, changing circumstances, life patterns. What is the benefit of living in a society or outside of one? I think we should skip this question.
Yeah, that was kind of, yeah, that's fine. That was kind of like a random sort of one because we were talking about society and stuff. So I was thinking, well,
Yeah. Why would it be good for a society to be structured based on human energy functions? What is the purpose? What did you answer that there?
I mean, I feel like it's sort of like, since they're already inherent stuff like that, they already are sort of happen. Like societies already are structured on human functions, I guess, and stuff like that, and the purpose we kind of like have gone through. But I was thinking like the purpose like behind doing something like that is like everyone would then feel like they belong, or that they have something to provide to others, that how they are and the way they are isn't like some kind of defect or unnecessary, or it's not even devalued. It's known to be like it has a purpose for existing or something. So if people were like aware of the types, and then societies were like, just societies acknowledge that the types exist and stuff like that, then people would be aware that other people have things to give and that their functions aren't defects, they're not unnecessary and stuff like that, but they are necessary and they have something to offer and give, I think. So, and like I think there would be more social, there would just be more freedom to like be authentic in general, I think, because people wouldn't be so I think worried or fearful about people expressing themselves, because they would understand it's coming from like their own authentic energy, I guess. Like there would be more openness to it, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking something similar, that it shouldn't really be a specific structure as such, but more like an awareness that you focus on a kind of education or like awareness around this. What I've written is that why it would be good to have a society structure based on human energy functions would be less dysfunctionality or pathological manifestations, less conflict, less waste of resources, because there are many potentials that are not being used because people everything is organized around the economy and a certain usefulness that disregards artistic merits, and there are certain qualities that are not being used, and there are many unknown possibilities that might start to become possible, and people will have a greater sense of substance through following their nature and not feeling
right.
like
I feel like there wouldn't be much of a question of like, what is my purpose, or like stuff like that, and like dreaming and stuff like that, rather than actually focused on existing and living and stuff. Like there wouldn't be that sort of need to find what my purpose is in life, and like I'll only find it when I'm 30 or 40 or later in my life or something. I know you have something already to give and offer to others. Like it comes back to like just being alive, I think, and actually living and engaging with people in the world.
It can be facilitation for greater flexibility and less rigidity, and more focus on knowledge and psychology would be required rather than on indoctrination to serve the system.
Yeah, more awareness and understanding.
I'm reminded of your comment. Andreas, a while ago, and I'm thinking to myself, what would it be like if one were to get all these different types together and sort of have an experiment, and then see what comes out. I would actually be interested to watch something like that, and then see how maybe have the same people out on vacation together or something like that.
Yeah.
And then see how they interact and how it comes out. Because we can only imagine now what would happen, but what would exactly happen if we can have these different energy types?
That would be an interesting, for example, idea for a show that you could make, that you could have people for different types.
So I guess I've noticed too, instead of saying like what would society be like if it was based on types? I guess it would be better to say, what would society be like if we became more aware of types, or if people were to become more aware and understanding of other people, maybe, or of other types, rather than what if society were based on types? Or
yeah, I don't think it would
something.
work that people would like be. I mean, types and functions are not the same things as specific occupations or professions. So I don't think it would work to like first we determine what type you are at birth or when you are like 7 years old, and then we put you on a specific school, and then you become a specific something. I don't think that's how we should look at this.
Yeah, I don't agree with that view either, because then I think it could create suffering down the line, because maybe someone does even though they have that type, maybe they don't want to go down that road or something, and now you're forcing them to just because this is their type or something, and this is what you think they would be best suited to. I feel like that would.
I mean, yeah, there could be many like distortions and risks with just because people our society is based on types doesn't mean that people really understand types. It becomes a kind of pseudo awareness where people start to stereotype and things like that.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, who will determine what type someone is? What if they mistype and then people are like, you need to do this because you are XYZ? Becomes kind of like a rigid morality.
Well, then I think it interferes with the authenticity too, because then you're not obviously going to be able to let people be authentic if you think they're this type and they should be like this. Then it's like, no, you're thinking then they're the problem, or they're not aware of their type. They need to become more aware or something. Here, like, we'll provide this information now. So I think it could halt authenticity or like in the way of it.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of resistance towards this kinds of thinking, especially within the left, typologies in general, because they view everything as a social construction, and it's a like taboo thing to take like essential, like even the notion of there being essences to things are controversial within the left.
Yeah, if differences between the sexes is controversial, then imagine something like different types.
Yeah, because I was talking to my friend about this typology, for example, about how you classify certain types as being masculine or feminine, and about what component of people or women that you type as being on the feminine types has been socialized into them, or is nature. So, that's controversial as well, because maybe their gradum size shows more than their sapientium, and they are a sapientium type or something like that.
But I mean, you could experiment with replacing feminine and masculine with a completely different word. I don't know, non-conventional types and conventional types, or maybe, I mean, social and antisocial. But masculine and feminine is very useful because it does seem like there are often more women who are like meritum and libidinum and the other feminine types, and there are more men who are excidium and abstractum and what I refer to as the masculine type. So there's definitely something there that I think is important to at least not forget, even if we experiment with different words in order to sell it to certain people.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So anyway, other things that might be or might be positive in a society is like a greater awareness in general, because if we think in terms of types, then we become a bit more curious about people, and then that gives opportunity to learn more. And if we also allow people to be authentic, because it's only through being authentic that we will learn what we are. If everyone is faking or hiding themselves, then it's difficult to understand what the types are.
Yeah. So that's why I think like encouraging authenticity in general would have to become a part of like society as well. Like it would have to be a value or something.
And also this practice that I talk about, preparing yourself so that you don't get upset if you encounter something unpleasant. And if you have an understanding of types, then you are more prepared that, okay, when you meet a person, what might have pissed you off before or become really disappointed, now you can sort of see, oh, it's that which I know some people will be like that because they belong to a certain type, and it's a consequence of certain cosmic necessities or something. You have to experiment with your attitude so that it can be facilitate less frustration and less unpleasant surprises. Because a lot of conflict between people in relationships and such is because people have certain expectations of people, and they think that other people should be able to do what they can do, or other things. And when they don't understand that people have limits according to type, and that people may behave in a unpleasant way to your own partiality or energy, then there is greater risk of conflict, as it always is with greater unconsciousness. So it comes back to like the general positive aspect of having more consciousness and preparation.
Also, it becomes harder to love people if you have expectations on them. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
Should. Will.
Yeah. A con might be that, I don't know, I'm thinking about scapegoating as well as another con that could happen. As in, people might just put all the blame on a specific energy and try to delete it, which already happened with eugenics, for example. Like, they might think that, oh, so the people that are like breaking the law the most and causing the most ruckus are everyone that has Exidium in their configuration and Exidium type. So let's get rid of that energy or something like that. I don't know if people might, if they like determine that they breaking the law is worse than the things that they can contribute to the species or something like that.
Yeah, that's already a question that occurs with like genetics. If you find the gene that makes you commit crime, should you remove it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that comes back to the question whether or not these are genetics. I mean, it might be that it's impossible to remove them. So it's like a moot point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I guess it is an empirical question.
Empirical as well, as in like they getting targeted as well, like as in what about scapegoating, as in Exidium solve the
But
problem.
what would be, say we could remove such a gene that's responsible for crime, but what would be, what if then the end result becomes something that's undesirable also? How can we be sure that a person without that criminal gene is going to be helpful to society? I think most of society is okay the way that it is. Maybe there's just more understanding and a more cohesive working relationship that we need. But we find the way we are with all these exitiums and stuff. We need them.
Yeah. One thing I find interesting is that, I mean, if we're talking about valuing pain and things like that, there is always something positive that can be found in most things. And I think that if people did try something crazy like that, removing Exidium energy or some gene that seems to be responsible for criminality, if they do that and it causes pain, then at least we will learn something and we will try to perhaps fix it again. I guess it comes down to if something we do is so bad that it is irreversible, but I'm not really, I mean, I find it fascinating, some of these crazy experiments, because sometimes you do learn things from them. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I guess in this case you could find out if you were to remove the criminal gene, or like would that really remove the criminal aspect of human beings or something.
But also it would
And then that
be
would-
an argument for the necessity of, like, if you were able to remove a part successfully, and all the parts are
Yeah.
necessary for each other, then you might, like, the damage might be reversible to all the other parts just because of this interdependence aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm thinking that I forgot what I was gonna say, but yeah. I mean, if these energies are like the result of cosmic necessities, then I don't think you can remove them. So I guess that's what I'm hoping, you know. But and I guess this is part of the exidiomic carelessness in me. But if I will be able to learn that these functions are like that, then my curiosity would accept such an experiment. Maybe, I don't know. That's how much I
Then
want.
again,
How much
but
I
then
want
again-
to know certain things.
probably you would need exitiums to remove these these genes responsible for the criminal element in humans. So I think you would need exitiums to do that. Then
Yeah.
if you get rid of exitiums, then you'll end up
With
having
other
exitiums
exitiums.
again.
It's funny. I
Yeah.
mean, I was thinking of meritums as well, but then meritums will think, but what about their families? Because like all of these Ethereum people have families and children, so that's where they will have a block, and that's where you will need other Ethereums to do it. So
Well, I think we could also ask then what criminality is in general, because like is criminality just going against rules or breaking rules, or is it like violence and killing people, and is it
Yeah, I think in the
theft
case
and
I
stealing?
mentioned, it was like violent crimes, like robbery and murder and stuff. That they found a gene that was correlated with aggression and hyperaggression and testosterone, and they could like isolate people in the population that had that gene did way more violent crime than people that didn't have it.
Do you know if they are going to attempt something with that?
No, I don't know if they are.
Let's see.
I think they can't because of like ethical rules.
The first step, maybe the first step to solving the problems of crime would be to decriminalize some crimes, things like dacha, for instance. I mean, it's just a plant that grows out there. It can't be a crime for you to be carrying leaves in your pocket. I mean, stuff like that. Maybe start there.
The issue is that many people with like all of these criminalizations and shit, I don't think they're gonna give up their agendas because they give them power. Like for example, the fight against drugs, it gives it gives the government a lot of control, and also waging war on the Middle East, for example, also gives America a lot of power. So I don't think it's like, yes, you could decriminalize many of that Cityomic tendencies, but I don't think I don't think that people are gonna listen, and that's kind of, I'm very pessimistic about that. So I'm kind of,
there are a lot of people who will protest something like that. I mean, yeah. So yeah, there are always those kind of experiments often become very limited if they happen at all. Like, because what they are going to try is to remove the genes in like a few individuals. It's not like they're going to do it worldwide ever, I don't think. Even if they wanted to. But anyway, we've been talking for more than 2 hours, and I mean, we do have some more things that we didn't touch on.
I mean, I feel like,
but for the most part, we touched.
I feel like
on
we
it.
got a good.
We got most of it.
Like even if we were to skip the last few questions, I feel like we pretty much like covered the whole entire thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we probably don't need to do a part 3, but perhaps someday in the future we might return to this topic, and I don't know if we have arrived at something more regarding these conclusions.
Well, I would think of it as like, I guess it would be like my way of thinking about it has changed. Like it's more like not necessarily, it's kind of like society is already structured like this. It's just that we're unaware of how it works, I guess. Like, so the only thing to do then is to increase the awareness of how it all works. So then not necessarily that you have to get some kind of like social theory or something and then apply it onto society, like this is how society will be structured, but that it already is the case. We just have to become more aware of the types and all this kind of stuff rather than setting a structure or something. At least that's how I was thinking about it at first, was a structure, but like now I'm thinking it's more just becoming aware.
Yeah. All right.
But could we not also attempt to maybe look at society and see? I'm thinking now of the energy types, and I'm also thinking of levels of development. Could it not be that society also is reflective of which of the level of consciousness that we generally at, and if we are at the morem, and then society would be more concerned with those issues, and that maybe as society evolves, it will at some stage get to more sapientium, to the sapientium sphere, and also then start to be concerned about why are we doing what we're doing, what's going on here, what's the reason for all this, and so on, which questions are not being asked now, because if you look at even leaders and so on are still concerned with the material aspects of life. Yeah, maybe we should also even hold on to that slightly, because it might rotate again, where we get to a point where we start asking questions, fundamental questions about what's going on, and then again get to a point where we are again, concerned with the material aspects of life in general. I'm thinking of it as a rotation, as a continuous movement, and so on.
Yeah. So anyone else want to say something before we stop?
No, I got nothing.
Yeah, I think that's good enough.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for participating, and yeah, take care.
Okay, thank you.